The FDA says marijuana has a legitimate medical purpose, you guys. Oh, man. The FDA released a report saying that marijuana does have a legitimate use for medical purpose and recommended that the U.S. Drug Enforcement Agency to change its classification from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3. In quotes, the definition of a Schedule 1 drug says it has no health benefits to it, and so obviously there's been plenty of research that has documented the multitudes of ways that cannabis can be helpful, said Dr. David Berger with Wholistic ReLeaf. Though not all medical community agree, many people swear by the medical effects of marijuana to help treat symptoms or cancer, anxiety, PTSD, and epilepsy. In quotes, it's no longer appropriate to say that there's no medical benefit when there are hundreds, if not thousands, of medical studies that show the opposite, explained Dr. Berger. As a Schedule 1 drug, marijuana is in the same category as some of the hardest drugs like heroin and LSD, which means it's classified as being more dangerous than fentanyl or methamphetamine. In quotes, what happens after is the federal government has made decisions to make as to what they're going to do next, said Dr. Berger. The Department of Health and Human Services formally recommended that the DEA classify marijuana as a Schedule 3 in August of last year after the Biden administration asked them to review how the drug is classified under federal law. And earlier this year, Senate Democrats urged Biden to deschedule the drug entirely, meaning you would not need a doctor's authorization to use medical cannabis. Well, there's a whole lot more that comes along with that, with descheduling, and that's what we advocate here for on High at 9 News, is for the full descheduling of cannabis. And the fact that the FDA just came around and said that there's medical value, just I'm sure is sending people like what's his name, Project Sam, in a head spin right now.
Sabet?
Yeah, Kevin Sabet. I'm sure Kevin Sabet is like sitting in his chair just spinning round and round and round in his desk chair today, trying to figure out some tweets to throw up in response to this. But I can't wait to hear what you guys have to say about this. This is Jason Beck for the High at 9 News. What do y'all think? Speechless,
well,
huh?
I can remember when marijuana was made illegal in 1970. I was in high school, and Ehrlichman, who worked with Nixon to do this, spilled the beans on him that they made heroin Schedule 1 to go after blacks and marijuana Schedule 1 to go after the hippies, which I consider myself one. Mm-hmm. And trying to undo that, it's been a 54-year odyssey here. And we still hear the nonsense and bullshit that keeps coming out to justify why we keep it there, when in fact, prior to 1970, and Molly's grandfather was a physician at the end of the 1800s, and he did tuberculosis, and cannabis opened the lungs, gave you an appetite. The original wasting syndrome was to TB before AIDS, and so it was commonly used. It was a very effective medicine, and up until 1940, when they took it out of the formulary, all physicians knew about it, and then it went away for a while. And now they're trying to bring it back, and you've got to justify what everybody who smokes weed when they're nauseated knows, okay? Or everybody who has a seizure disorder and uses it knows what it does, or PTSD. And it's like we're screaming into the wind here against people who have their head so far up their ass, that thing in their throat is their nose. It's just hard to even comment about this, how ridiculous all of this is.
Mm-hmm. I agree, Dale. It's utterly ridiculous, utterly ridiculous. And they're advocating for this Schedule 3, which they're going to have full jurisdiction on. They're going to just rampage everybody in cannabis with. But I hate to say I told you so.
Well, I think it's the end of social equity. If that's what happens, people like me that might qualify because of a felon, or Yarrow, you might qualify. You're not going to get a Schedule 3 license to be involved in this. It just ain't going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm qualified in multiple jurisdictions. I'm verified social equity in San Francisco, Sonoma County. Depending upon the guidelines, you pick a market, and I probably check most of the boxes. Mm-hmm. I think the news here is not the news. I think the news here is, here's another indication of how slow the government is to acknowledge the reality and to embrace the facts that have been sitting on the table of unambiguous, undeniable, and unrefutable body of knowledge. And what comes up for me is just how many areas, how many places, how many subjects is the government doing this, where they slow roll, they backpedal, they gaslight, they deny, and eventually they go, oh yeah, okay, and I think that's the thing that we get to talk about on the political and news commentary show is like, where can the government do a much better job? And so for me, that's what comes up when I think about this article is just, this isn't news. The news is that they're finally embracing some information that a lot of Americans have already understood.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, this is, I can't believe that they're coming out and saying this, and I can't believe that that Javier Becerra didn't even mention any of this in his testimony yesterday. Just saying.
Well, they don't want to talk about it.
No, they don't.
Because it's not hard to put in front of me. Sue Sisley's study, after all the horseshit she went through to get it done, that smoking weed helps PTSD. Now there's an accepted medical use. That should have poked a big hole in Schedule 1 without having to continue to fight like we do to justify, because, I forgot about Schedule 1 or 5. You know, that's a kind of head up your ass gaff that makes all of us shake our head. Because the nonsense that keeps getting thrown in there, let's define it one way or define it another way. We have at least a 5,000-year written history of what this plant does. Mm-hmm. There's never been a kid born with 3 arms you say, weed caused that. Addiction was never the concern. That was with, opium and things like that. So refuse to go back and look at the efficacy and the safety of this with 5,000 years of written history just tells me you don't want to look at this. You just don't want to do it.
I agree. They want to pass the buck and just skirt it off and expend all of the political capital that all the activists have built up over the years to get us to this point, and then they're just going to blow their load on Schedule 3, and it's going to be a big fat mess, and no one's going to want to clean it up.